Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Anita of Her Divine Path, and this is a channel that is dedicated to nature-led intuitive medicine, ancestral wisdom, and an inner orientation recalibration. So I wanted to talk today about something that I have felt in me in the last few days, and I am sure many of you have been feeling this same sentiment. This is going to be a long one, so grab yourself a cup of tea, light some incense, kick your feet up, and get comfortable. So, when the Epstein files were released, I told myself that I was not going to look at them. In fact, it was my higher self telling myself not to look at them. I was guided by Source not to look at the files. I was being asked to keep my eyes shielded from such atrocity because I was being asked to keep my eyes and my heart pure at that moment, my intentions pure, my mind clear, because when we read of atrocities taking place, it is very easy for us to be overcome with emotion, lose logic and reasoning, and respond from a place of reactivity, which rightfully so is almost welcome in this circumstance. But by doing that, we tend to give ourselves to an energy that might be feeding the actual demon. And so I was guided not to look at the files. And I also felt intuitively that it wasn't something that I should be doing, because I felt as though I would be willingly, voluntarily giving my energy to something. And when we tend to give our energy to something, it enhances the very thing we are giving our energy to. So God, Source, was asking me to shield my eyes from it for a while and look at it from an observer's perspective, which I was doing. I was observing society as they were diving in full force into the files. But then something happened. Source spoke to me and said, I think your wisdom is needed here. And so as I was watching people respond and react with high intensity and high emotion, which rightfully so, I also noticed that I needed to chime in with my words of wisdom at moments and remind people that we still needed to keep logic about us. Otherwise, we would be no different than those people who perform these atrocities. I also was reminded in witnessing the actions of the Book of Enoch and the parallel between the fallen angels, the Watchers, and civilization at that time. There's a great animated video on YouTube on the Book of Enoch. If you can find it, I highly suggest you watch it. And so during this time, the past several weeks, I have not been diving into the files. I have not read any emails until 2 days ago. And in the last 72 hours, my entire world shifted. I say this because my world didn't shift solely because of what I was reading. My world shifted because I suddenly immersed myself in reading the comments of people, of reading the reactions of people, and how they were responding to the situation as a society. And for 72 hours, I was just glued to my phone, my poor dog, waiting for me to take him out as I just went through video after video, email after email, the comments, and just absorbing it all. It was almost as if I was hypnotized. I'd stayed up until 7 in the morning one night. I stayed up until 5 in the morning another night, 6:30 in the morning, and I was just absorbing the reactions of society. I didn't feel myself getting reactionary. In fact, I felt very much the observer. But yesterday, I told myself enough, as I looked over to my dog and saw him laying on the sofa just staring at me, and we didn't get out a lot yesterday. The weather was not good, and I had spent the whole day on my phone looking at reactions, comments, videos regarding the Epstein files. And it was about 9:30 p.m., 10 p.m. when I said to myself, okay, this has to stop right now. You're stopping this right now. Put your phone down and walk away. And I got up and I walked over to the sink, and I was getting my dog a little snack and one for myself. And I was like, whoa, what was that? That felt like a hypnosis. I felt like I had been hypnotized. I felt as though society was being hypnotized by this releasing of the files. And I want to be very clear here, because I am not saying that society is under a hypnosis and that this is a conspiracy theory. What I am saying is that I felt as though society were falling under a hypnosis of sorts. Now let's just look into what hypnosis is before I go on in this video. So first, hypnosis is not a mind control. It is not sleep. And nobody can be made to do something against their will. But at the foundation of hypnosis, it's actually built on a very focused attention, a suggestion, and an altered awareness. And that's what I was feeling. So modern hypnosis began with a Scottish surgeon by the name of James Braid in the 1840s. He rejected the earlier idea of animal magnetism, which was popularized by Franz Mesmer, and instead proposed that hypnosis was a psychological state, not mystical energy. And I'm quoting that. But then later we have figures like Sigmund Freud, who experimented with hypnosis in early psychotherapy, and he eventually moved away from it. In the 20th century, we had people like Milton Erickson, who experimented also with hypnosis into a more conversational and subtle and psychologically sophisticated practice. His work heavily influences modern hypnotherapy today. So basically, hypnosis evolved from these ideas of mystical theories and psychological models to a clinical therapeutic practice, and it is used today. And there is also sleep hypnosis. But what is hypnosis actually, and why is this interesting to what I experienced while diving into the Epstein files within 3 days and fully immersing myself in it? Well, hypnosis basically is an intentional guide, much like meditation, and it works by relaxing the body. It narrows one's attention down and it reduces that critical filtering, and then it's introducing a sort of suggestion. So the key mechanisms to hypnosis are a focused attention and imagination. And your brain is responding to imagined experiences similarly to real ones. Now, if we take a look at the psychological foundations of hypnosis, hypnosis itself is built on several core principles. So first, hypnosis is built on suggestibility. Humans are very suggestible creatures. Our language influences our perception, and people's tones will influence our beliefs and the way we interpret those beliefs. And then repetition tends to influence our acceptance of something, right? Does this sound familiar? Think back to 2020 and the repetition, the words used, the language, the tone. So again, language will influence the perception, tone will influence the belief, and then of course the repetition influences the acceptance. And hypnosis is about repetition. Then we have the dissociation. In hypnosis, part of the mind will observe while another part experiences. And if you've ever done sleep hypnosis, you understand what that means. You can literally feel calm while recalling stressful moments. You literally are dissociating your body from the experience while using your imagination. It's quite powerful. And so in circumstances where they ask you to imagine heat, and this is done in meditation too, in guided visualized meditations, imagine you are feeling a warmth overcome your body, the sun is shining brightly on your face, etc., etc. Then we have the expectation. So if someone believes hypnosis will work, it works better. This is the same for meditation. Belief will amplify a responsiveness. We could even go into the placebo effect in this case, because there are many cases of placebo effects, and we have read about this in science. But this is why stage hypnosis works so dramatically, because the expectation plus the environment plus the social dynamics, and all of a sudden everyone's eyes are just fixated. They have this fixed attention and the belief is elevated. This is also why meditation in group is also very powerful, and sometimes more powerful than doing meditation on one's own. Now, the focused attention. So our brains cannot process everything all at once. So when people's attention narrows, our peripheral awareness softens. And we have some of the suggestions that are made in hypnosis that are helping bypass some of the analytical filtering that goes on in our brains. But what hypnosis is not, and I'm going to be clear here, it's not an unconsciousness. It's not a surrender of your control. It is not sleep, and it is not supernatural. You can reject any of those suggestions at any time, and you can open your eyes and you can stop. You are aware the entire time, just a different sort of awareness. I know when I do sleep hypnosis, I am aware until I fall asleep, and then I tend to lucid dream a lot. So sometimes what I am visualizing is incorporated into my dreams, or at least it opens a pathway for my dreams to occur. Now, why does hypnosis work? Because the mind tends to use imagination to construct an experience, and the body is going to respond to that mental imagery. So, belief alters perception. We've heard this spoken about in neuroscience. Belief alters perception. Its focus changes the state. So, if we take those into consideration, and I had to define what hypnosis is for you, I would say that it is the attention plus the imagination plus the suggestion plus the reduced critical filtering equals this sort of trance response. Aha! A light bulb went off for me, right? I was in a trance. I was in a trance with the Epstein files. But there's something deeper going on here. Because it wasn't just about the files for me. It was about what society was saying about the files. Now, when I use the word suggestibility, humans are suggestible. What I'm talking about is that's basically a human's responsiveness to ideas. It's not mind control. Hypnosis is not mind control. It is not an obedience. It's literally, if I say, imagine biting into a lemon right now, you're probably going to respond a little bit to that because of your experience with the lemon, and now your imagination is working to connect to that experience. Now, when I do talk about suggestibility, I do want to mention that when humans are suggestible, it's not a question of are they in a state where they are losing their morals or their judgment, or, you know, you become someone's puppet. That's not how hypnosis works. But because the mind becomes more experiential than evaluative, and you get more immersed in the imagery of what is transpiring and the sensation of what is transpiring, you're going to feel it. So if I were to walk you through a guided meditation, which I do often, and ask you to relax your shoulders, allow your body to sink into the earth, allow your arms to feel heavy, feel the weight of your body, you are going to immediately start feeling that. You are going to feel your body and your arms getting heavy and sinking into the earth. And so this is the power of what it feels like to be in trance. It's also the power of our minds, our imaginations, because if I ask you to recall a stressful event, you are going to tighten up. If a memory surfaces or an image surfaces that you can't fathom, your body is going to tighten. And so this is what I have been noticing happen in reading some of the comments in the Epstein files. But I wanted to talk about something before I went on to what I'm really going to get at here. So furthermore, with this idea that we are suggestible, humans are suggestible during hypnosis, what I wanted to say is that they have an increased suggestibility during hypnosis. When a suggestion is given, you're not going to evaluate it first, you're going to actually experience it first. And in meditation, this is what happens. You experience the suggestion first as opposed to evaluating it. So you're going from, is this true, to what would this feel like if it were true? You're not lying on a beach if I were to tell you to imagine yourself lying on a beach, but the suggestibility is, what would this feel like if it were true? And because it comes from our experiences as well, and what it would feel like if it were true, our body will respond. Now, here's where things get interesting. The brain becomes more responsive to internally generated experience and externally offered ideas with temporarily reduced critical thinking. What does that mean? It basically means you are going from an analysis in your mind to an experience in your mind and body. At least this is how I interpret it. This is how I have learned about it. And so it's basically this cognitive flexibility that we tend to take on when we are undergoing a sort of trance, whether hypnosis or meditation. But here's where my question came in yesterday. Is this true? To what if this were true? To this is true. And so it's a pattern that I noticed. It was this shift from evaluating truth to experiencing suggestibility to experiencing possibility. So I started trying to understand what I was witnessing, if that was happening at a global dynamic societal scale. And I started to ask myself, is this a type of hypnosis? Is this a type of psychological influence? Is this a political or media narrative formation, and we have been victims of that for a long time. And so it would be easy to fall into believing that. But my thought process went deeper than all of those. And when I investigated, what I understood was happening was emotional priming, repetition, narration framing or narrative framing, fear activation, identity reinforcement. That's basically considered social psychology. It's not hypnosis, even though to me, I felt like I was sort of in this trance along with the rest of society. But what I was sensing is this. When we have a public event, supercharged, and of course this is like anything that is related to a super high profile investigation. We could go back and talk about the O.J. Simpson trial. We can talk about the Johnny Depp trial with Amber Heard, scandals. We have several forces that are activating. So our emotional amplification is definitely activated. There is this fear, this angle, this moral outrage. There is this sense of a reduced critical filtering, which could appear like a hypnosis, but it's actually a stress response. It's stress physiology. It's basically your nervous system is collapsing because all of the nuances have collapsed. And then, of course, we have the repetition of these files and of everything in them that is so repetitive. It's basically we're seeing something be repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated. And I'm actually getting chills saying that. Then there's this thing called identity-based processing, where people process information through a tribal lens. And this is where it's going to get interesting. So basically what is transpiring at this level is that when something of this magnitude and is exposed and feels this overwhelming and this chaotic, and it's so morally charged, the brain is going to want two things: coherence and closure. I realized yesterday in all of the comments that I was reading that people were seeking closure. But here's the thing. There's a chance that there might not be a closure. So what will we do as a society then? And I'm not talking about arrests only. I'm talking about closure to the darkness. So when our brains on a mass scale want a type of coherence, they are automatically going to look for an explanation, a villain, a sort of structure. And I noticed that a lot in the comments. People were looking for a sort of structure, but at the same time, they were asking for this structure to collapse entirely, but yet they were asking why the Department of Justice wasn't being held accountable for arrests. So again, that's structure. But then at the same time, they wanted a villain, and a lot of people were pointing to Trump. It was interesting reading the comments and seeing how there was this sort of mass hypnosis, this mass trance. But this goes really deep, you guys. This goes really deep. So it's not that society is hypnotized. And I went into a profound investigation regarding this yesterday because I was curious. And as I am very philosophical and anthropological, I was really curious about the human behavior. So large groups of people can become emotionally activated and cognitively narrowed by repeated identity reinforcing narratives. And we saw this happen with COVID. And so here's something interesting, because I've been talking about the tectonic plates and the Ring of Fire and the Ring of Fire archetype, as well as the Fire Horse archetype. Internal landscapes are mirroring our external landscapes, and your mind, or at least mine does, and maybe you are one of these people out there with me, my mind is mapping these patterns. Is anyone else's mind mapping patterns here? Again, I am not saying that society is under any sort of mystical mind control. even though it felt like this embodied energetic power all on its own for me. What I was noticing was that there was kind of a collective narrowing of attention, this sort of psychological absorption. And why? Because this has affected every single person worldwide. It is just like the pandemic, really. And so what I realized I was observing was this mass attentional capture. And so there are going to be people who are morally charged and emotionally activated and symbolically loaded. And this is going to be repeated across every single platform, social media platform, media outlet that we have right now on our earth. It's like this bandwidth of cognitive behavior is being pulled together. And so people are going to start reading every email, decoding every line, scanning for hidden meanings and messages, because their nervous system is engaged, you guys. And that engagement will increase the pattern seeking, the meaning making, the emotional investment, and the narrative completion. They are going to want to look for closure. People are so involved in this because they are looking for closure. And how does this resemble that suggestibility in hypnosis that I was talking about? It's because the mind is shifting from, is this verified and contextually grounded, or is this like, what is this? What is this implying? What is this revealing? What is this revealing about our society? What is this revealing about how we've been governed and led since our births? And that is a huge and heavy energy. And when something feels this historically significant or morally explosive, your brain is going to shift into this sort of high stake puzzle where like your attention is heightened, and your heightened attention reduces your peripheral skepticism, because nobody's a skeptic now. No conspiracy theories going on now. This is the truth. It has been revealed. And that reduced skepticism is going to have this huge expansion of interpretation. And so I personally don't see that. It's not that people aren't thinking. I actually think people are very acutely aware of their thoughts right now. And why does that feel so trance-like to me? Because of these three things: the repetition, the emotional charge, and the social reinforcement. We are seeing it everywhere. We are seeing thousands of others analyzing the same fragments. But what it really is attention plus emotion plus this group energy. So what are you saying, Anita? What I am saying is that intense narrative environments are actually going to alter how we process information. And there's so much to investigate here. There's so much to explore. But I am talking about this the reason I am talking about this is because perhaps many of you feel like you are in this trance. And what I'm trying to tell you is that it's okay. It's okay to be absorbed by what is transpiring right now, because somewhere in your heart of hearts and your brain of brains, you are looking for a sort of coherence, a sort of closure, and it's kind of resembling a meditative state, believe it or not. It's literally a dopamine-driven attentional loop wrapped in this emotional charge and a collective energy. Everybody is in this collective energy right now. And so this narrowing of attentions is very similar to meditation. And I think I made the parallels with that last night when I got up and said, okay, this has to stop. And then I walked over to my sink and I thought, wow, I feel like I've just been in a trance for 3 days. So I had to explore why this felt like hypnosis to me. And it's basically because when something feels significant, the brain is going to allocate more focus, concentration, more attention to that one particular subject. And then of course we have that intermittent reward loop, right? That's social media in general. They basically created social media for this intermittent reward loop. So we start paying attention to understand every new email or every new commentary or every new little detail. Like everything seems like a little reward at the moment. And then rewards to our brains are super, super powerful when it comes to our neurological neurology. Our brains love reward. Humans love reward. And so you don't know what the next scroll is going to be or what the next email is going to be. And so we're just sort of hooked in. I don't want to say hooked to. We are hooked in to this collective energy and this high stakes profile situation. And spikes of dopamine that we are getting from reading this, because our brain is looking for that reward. And then I also want to mention how when something feels consequential, like it's something that's actually going to matter historically, and this does fall in that category, our brain is going to treat it as a survival relevant piece of information. And that kind of overrides a sort of boredom or a fatigue. And it creates this sort of urgency, and urgency feels like a pull. So again, it was this, I felt like I was being pulled into this collective energy. It was like, it was a pull. It felt like that. It felt like exactly like my hands are. It was this energetic pull, and I'm very susceptible to energy. So I actually felt this collective pull. And again, I just wanted to mention, I felt like I had been in a trance for the last couple of days. But the interesting parallel is it was doing to me exactly what meditation does. So, scrolling deeply into that charged material was producing for me the same sort of neurocognitive patterns that were happening, or that do happen with me in meditation. Now, I told myself to snap out of it, because there's something that should be observed here. I'm an avid meditator. So when I meditate, what is actually happening is my parasympathetic nerve is regulated. That's the dominant part. When you are sort of what they call doom scrolling, your sympathetic nerve is activated. And that's like the little micro stresses that you feel, and that tension you feel reading each of the emails, and the anxiety. But I actually had a moment where I was observing myself outside of myself, and I just said, snap out of it. You have to stop this right now. Not because I didn't want to know, but because, again, I was being pulled out of that collective energy, because the whole reason I went into this collective energy was to observe society and understand where we are at as a collective. Now I'm going to get into the entire deeper layer of this. And I am reading my notes here, because I have a lot of notes that I was taking on my observations yesterday and on my investigation. And what was kind of transpiring yesterday, or with the files in general, is the files represent a sort of revelation, right? There's something psychologically seductive about being so close to revelation. So when a case feels like something is being exposed and there's corruption being revealed, which we are seeing to immense levels, and there's truth emerging, guess what it triggers? It triggers this archetypal circuitry, and we get the unveiling. The files have been released, and then we get the reckoning. Well, we are waiting for the reckoning, but we do have the hidden being brought to light. So for me, as I investigated the basis of this trance-like state that felt like meditation and reading the files, I found it to be extremely symbolic. It was extremely, extremely symbolic. because I realized I wasn't just reading emails, I was actually engaging in a revelation narrative. People talk about the revelations in the Bible. This is what it feels like. So let's just talk about this for a minute. I noticed that there are a lot of content creators that were digging deep into the files. And again, many might be paid. This might be their source of income. There are various reasons why people do what they do. But I personally felt like everyone was doing this because everyone is waiting for closure. But this is not going to be closed that easily, as I had mentioned. When we are dealing with darker forces or darker energies, it's not like the case can just be closed. Evil has apprentices. Evil has generations of people it has trained. And I think we need to come to terms with the fact that there is a good chance that there may not be closure, but at least there is the revealing. And perhaps there will be the reckoning. But we may not get closure. We may not get closure on this. There is a good chance that this story is going to be and feel unfinished, and especially because it involves a lot of power, secrecy, morality. It's leaving these open loops that I think people are drawn to make sense of, and this is why there is this collective pull, this collective energy towards this focused attention and concentration, because our brains literally are not wired for narratives to be unresolved or not closed. The brain naturally wants completion. This is why when you are in a relationship or a breakup and you feel like you don't have closure, you just ruminate over why, until you feel like you have some sort of closure, whether that is the final conversation, a final intimate moment, or maybe you just writing a letter to yourself after years because you haven't been able to get that closure. The brain needs closure. But what if this story doesn't finish? And I think we need to prepare ourselves for that as a society. There may be a reckoning, but it doesn't necessarily mean to say it is finished. At least the evil and the darker energies may not be finished. There is that even if there are arrests made, there may not be a psychological closure, and so we as individuals and as a collective need to brace ourselves for that, because this could be one of those stories. It's so big, you guys. It's so big. And some stories will never feel fully resolved, and if they're not fully resolved, it's going to remain symbolic for the rest of our time on Earth and each individual person's time here on Earth. I mean, even moving forward, when we are no longer here, the generations that come after us. I don't have children, but imagine your children's children and their children. Where is this going to end? There's a possibility we have to resign ourselves to the fact that there will always be a circuit of darker forces and of darker energies that also have passed on the torch, per se. So yeah, I wanted to start off this video with that because the more I started digging deeper into that aspect of what I was witnessing from an observer's perspective and watching the content creators, and I know everyone creates content for varying reasons, it did become very symbolic to me. And of course it would, because I'm spiritually led. And so what I noticed was this, and I'm trying really hard to focus my attention on what I have processed and what I have learned and also what I have felt. And so basically what was activated yesterday in me is the question that I had to ask myself when I found myself consumed for 72 hours with the Epstein files, and then I pulled myself out of it, and it literally felt like I'd been thrown into a hurricane and then just snatched out of it. So what kind of came to my mind as I was watching this collective energy and these collective people, I started thinking about the archetypes, and I started thinking about the archetypes that got activated when humanity gathered around fires. And this right now is that. It's not even about the hypnosis I felt. It's not about the obsession. It's not about the case even, really. What I noticed was the archetype of revelation. And whoa, I just got chills up and down my spine. This is the archetype of revelation. I just got chills again. And when revelation enters the collective field, several archetypes awaken at once. And stay tuned, because we are going to talk about that in the next video. Thank you for watching. My name is Anita of Her Divine Path. I'm going to continue this in the next video, where we are going to talk about the archetype of revelation and the archetypes that have awoken during this collective field of collective energy of humanity witnessing one of the greatest examples of evil in our world, as everyone is focused with high concentration and intensity on the Epstein files. And I'm going to talk to you about how my investigation of my 72 hours into the files, reading the comments and being pulled into that energy, led me to feeling like I was in a trance, in a sort of state of hypnosis, and then pulling myself out of that to observe from a distance how what I was actually witnessing was not a hypnosis of society, but it was basically the society gathering around a fire.